If you enjoy spine-chilling, ultra-realistic horror stories that'll keep you up at night, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell icon so you never miss a terrifying tale. Also, I'd love to know where and at what time you're watching this. Drop it down in the comments below, whether it's 3 a.m. in your bedroom, midnight on a road trip, or a rainy evening at home. Let's see who's watching in the creepiest setting. I never thought twice about shopping alone growing up in a mid-sized Illinois suburb. Life always felt insulated from the kind of stories you hear on podcasts or see in those clickbait articles. Our Target sat on the edge of town, nestled between a strip mall and a quiet residential neighborhood with neat lawns and old oak trees. It wasn't just a store. It was the place my mom dragged me on boring Sunday afternoons, where high schoolers hung out when they had nowhere else to go, where I stopped after class or worked to grab the usual stuff. It was familiar, safe, predictable, but I've learned that evil loves predictability. I was in my last semester of community college, juggling a waitressing job, a suffocating course load, and the creeping dread of what came next in life. My parents always told me to be frugal, so I still lived at home, doing what I could to save up before transferring to a 4-year college. That Target had become part of my routine, a stop I made almost every other day, whether I needed toiletries, snacks, or just an excuse to get out of the house and breathe. October was creeping in, the kind of gray, wet October that turns leaves to mush and makes everything feel damp and hollow. I remember the day exactly because it was so unremarkable. Until it wasn't. I'd pulled into the Target parking lot around 3:30 p.m., the sky already bruised with low clouds. I'd been fighting off a cold for days and just wanted to grab some allergy meds, vitamin C, and maybe a cheap throw blanket I'd been eyeing. I parked closer to the garden center entrance, my usual spot, and went through the automatic doors, greeted by the smell of popcorn and the faint hum of bad pop music over the speakers. Everything felt normal, until it didn't. I noticed him first, in the cold medicine aisle. He wasn't particularly tall or built, actually the opposite. Thin, almost frail, with an awkward slouch that made him look like he was constantly trying to disappear into his own body. But what made my skin crawl wasn't his build. It was the way he stood, too still, too intentional. His eyes were what hit me hardest, sunken, pale, hollow in a way that made me feel like I wasn't looking at a person, but something wearing a person's skin. His greasy, dark hair was slicked back into a style that tried way too hard to be trendy, paired with a sparse, patchy beard that didn't do him any favors. I tried to ignore him at first. I hovered in front of the allergy meds, pretending to debate between the store brand and the name brand, but my stomach twisted tighter with every glance I caught of him inching closer. I told myself I was being paranoid. Then came the voice. Flat, soft, but unsettling. Indecision's rough, huh? I blinked and turned. He was right there, closer than I realized. Too close. Yeah, I guess, I muttered, hoping to cut the interaction short. He didn't move away. Instead, he smiled. But it wasn't a smile. It was something else. Something that felt rehearsed, like a predator pretending to be human. "What's your name?" he asked, like he was entitled to it. I gave him a fake one. "Jenna." He grinned wider. "That's a cute name. Mine's Kyle." I mumbled something polite, grabbed the bigger bottle just to have an excuse to move, and turned to leave. That's when I felt it. His hand on my shoulder. Not a hard grip, but enough to freeze me. Enough to flood my veins with ice. "Hey, wait," he said softly, as if we were already friends. "You're cute. Let me get your number." Every cell in my body screamed no, but I froze. I didn't want to make a scene. I didn't want to trigger anything. So against every survival instinct I had, I gave him a number. My real number. I figured I could block him later. He typed it in like he'd just won the lottery. I left shaking, telling myself he'd forget about me by tomorrow. I couldn't have been more wrong. When I pulled into my driveway 10 minutes later, I tried to shake it off, told myself it was just a weird guy, an awkward encounter, nothing more. I grabbed a few grocery bags and headed toward the door. That's when I saw the car. It crept down the street and stopped right in front of my house. Tinted windows, no plates visible. My breath caught in my throat. I just knew it was him. I didn't need to see his face to feel his eyes on me. I abandoned my bags and ran inside, locking the door behind me. I peered through the peephole. The car idled for what felt like an eternity before slowly pulling away. That night, the texts started. At first, they were awkward, clumsy attempts at flirting, trying to play off like we'd made some instant connection. But within hours, the tone changed. He got aggressive, accusatory when I didn't reply. He sent paragraphs about how I was fated to be with him. When that didn't work, he turned to threats. I still hear the words sometimes in my head like an echo that won't fade. You belong to me, and if I see you with anyone else, they'll pay for it. I wanted to block him. God, I should have, but I didn't. I needed to know what he was planning. If I cut off my only window into his thoughts, I'd be blind. That's when the stalking escalated. I told myself I wouldn't go back. After the second incident, seeing that figure in the ski mask lurking by the loading dock in the half-dark, I swore off target runs, especially at night. I didn't even drive past the place. If I needed groceries or anything else, I stuck to the little 24-hour convenience store 2 blocks from my apartment. It wasn't the same, overpriced and half-stocked with sketchy produce, but it felt safer. For a while, nothing happened. No strange texts. No tinted windowed cars parked across the street. No random lingering faces behind trees when I left work. The silence was almost worse in a way, because I couldn't tell if it meant it was over or if something was waiting. A month passed, then another. I started to relax, just a little. I went back to my routines: work, class, sleep. I stopped checking over my shoulder every time I walked to my car after late shifts at the call center. I even started driving by Target again, though I never went inside. Until one evening in mid-January. It was one of those bitterly cold nights where the air feels like it could slice your skin open. A heavy, wet snow had started falling around 6, and by the time I left work at 9:30, the streets were blanketed. Visibility was terrible, everything muted by snow, like the world had been wrapped in a thick, suffocating blanket. I was exhausted. My boss had dumped back-to-back calls on me in the last hour, and I hadn't eaten since noon. The thought of going home to my empty apartment with no food and no heat, the furnace had crapped out that morning, and the landlord wasn't sending anyone until the next day, made me pull off on the highway exit almost on instinct. The road to Target was plowed, but empty. The parking lot barely touched, with maybe 4 cars scattered near the entrance. I don't know what made me do it. Maybe it was the exhaustion, maybe the weather, maybe the craving for the familiarity of those bright, orderly aisles. I told myself I'd be quick, in and out in 10 minutes. Just grab some microwave dinners, maybe a pack of cold medicine. For the cough I could feel starting in my chest. I parked near the front, under one of the few working street lamps. The snow made everything eerily quiet, the only sound the occasional shriek of wind cutting between the light poles. I stayed in my car for a full minute, engine running, hands clenched tight around the steering wheel. It's fine, I told myself. I locked eyes with my reflection in the rearview mirror. Just groceries, 5 minutes. I went in. The store was almost completely deserted, save for 2 teenage girls giggling near the makeup aisle and an older man methodically scanning DVDs and electronics. A bored look, but nothing seemed out of place. I moved through the aisles quickly. Frozen foods, soup, cereal. I barely even looked up, just tossed items in my cart, eager to get it over with. It wasn't until I hit the home goods section that the feeling returned. That sick, crawling awareness at the base of my skull, the sensation of eyes on my back. I stopped, mid-aisle. The place was empty, or so it looked. Then, on instinct, I glanced down toward the far end of the store, past the seasonal displays, the darkened garden center, and toward the employee-only doors by the stockroom. And there he was. Or maybe it wasn't him. I couldn't tell. The ski mask was gone, replaced by a gray hoodie pulled low over his face. The same frail build, the same slouched posture. He was standing perfectly still in front of the fire exit. No cart, no shopping bags, just standing, facing me. I felt my stomach drop, my pulse hammer in my ears. I turned sharply down the next aisle, abandoning my half-full cart. My mind scrambled for what to do. Call 911? Go to the front desk? I glanced back. He was moving now. Slow, measured, not like someone shopping, like someone following. I darted around the corner and nearly ran smack into one of the employees, a young guy I vaguely recognized from my old late-night runs. Name tag read Ethan. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked, startled. I must have looked like hell. "There's a guy, back by the fire exit," I managed, my voice cracking. "He's not shopping. He's following me." Ethan's face shifted instantly, the way someone does when they sense a situation is serious. He pulled out his phone. "Go up front," he told me. "Tell Lisa at the service desk. I'll check it out." I didn't argue. I half ran toward the front, heart slamming in my chest. I reached the service desk, breathless, and managed to stammer out what was happening. Lisa, the cashier, paled. "Stay here," she said. "We'll call the cops. Store's got cameras." Another employee came out of the back, locking the front doors behind me. They had me wait for a customer service wait while Ethan went to look. The minutes crawled. Finally, he came jogging up, face pale, a manager in tow. "He's gone," Ethan said, breathing hard. I followed him out back toward the loading dock, but by the time I got there, the door was open and nobody was around. Couldn't tell where he went in the snow. Police arrived 10 minutes later. They took my statement and checked the cameras. Sure enough, there he was, the same figure, watching me from the end of the aisle, moving when I moved. I knew the way he moved, the deliberate stillness, the waiting. It was the same kind of thing Kyle had done. It might not have been the same man, but it was the same kind of predator. After that, I stopped going anywhere alone at night. I changed my number, moved apartments, quit the call center job. To this day, I can't pass a big box store at night without feeling the phantom weight of eyes at my back, waiting behind dimly lit aisles, lingering just out of sight. It's been over a year, but sometimes, especially on cold, empty nights, I swear I catch a figure watching me from across a parking lot. The outline of a hooded head, a shadow that vanishes when I blink. Maybe it's paranoia, maybe it's guilt, or maybe evil doesn't just haunt a place. It remembers the people too. I never thought a place like Target could make me feel unsafe. For as long as I could remember, it had been my go-to spot for just about everything. It's funny, I always joked that if I needed milk, makeup, and a new lamp, Target was the place to be. Living in the smaller city of Clayton Falls, there weren't many options anyway. Sure, we had a Walmart on the other side of town, but something about Target always felt cleaner, more organized, less chaotic. It was my comfort zone. I worked second shift at a call center downtown, and by the time I clocked out at 10 p.m., most places were closed or closing. Target was one of the few that stayed open till midnight, which made it perfect for late-night errands. In fact, those late-night Target runs had kind of become part of my routine. There was something peaceful about roaming the quiet aisles when the store was nearly empty. No crowds, no lines, just the soft hum of the lights and the occasional distant beep of a register. That's why what happened still feels so unreal to me. Target wasn't supposed to be scary. It started on an ordinary Tuesday. I remember it well because it had been an especially long day, the kind where customers seemed angrier, the clock moved slower, and by the time I got off work, I was too wired to go straight home. I figured I'd swing by Target, pick up some groceries, maybe a few snacks for the week, and just decompress while strolling the aisles. It was around 10:45 p.m. when I pulled into the familiar lot. The parking area was half empty, the overhead lights casting pools of yellow that flickered slightly. I parked in my usual spot, a row or two from the entrance, close enough to feel safe, but far enough that I wouldn't feel boxed in. Inside, the store was as quiet as I expected. A few employees were restocking shelves, and a couple of other late-night shoppers wandered about, pushing half-empty carts. I grabbed a cart and started my usual loop, produce first, then pantry snacks, and finally, refrigerated items. It was always the same pattern. I liked knowing exactly where everything was. It made me feel in control. But that night, something felt off. And at first, I couldn't even put my finger on it. It wasn't the store. The lights were the same. The music was the same. It was the people, or rather, the lack of them. By the time I made it to the back section, the cold foods, the place felt almost too empty. Even the employees I'd seen earlier seemed to have disappeared. As I pushed my cart past the frozen pizzas, I heard it. A soft movement. Between the cracks in the shelving where the frozen cases backed up against the storage area, I caught the briefest glimpse of something. A figure. Someone was back there. I leaned forward, peering through the narrow space between the racks. It wasn't a Target employee. No red shirt, no khakis. Instead, black. All black. And then the unmistakable detail that made my stomach knot. A ski mask. At first, I stood there frozen, telling myself maybe I was wrong. Maybe it was someone doing maintenance work. But then the figure moved again, and this time, it felt deliberate. As I moved further down the aisle, pretending to browse, I noticed the figure was following me, keeping pace from behind the shelving. My heart hammered in my chest. This wasn't normal. This wasn't safe. Trying to act casual, I grabbed a random item, a frozen meal, and started heading toward the next aisle, keeping my head down. But the figure didn't stop. Now I could see more of him through the gaps, the ski mask, the black hoodie, the gloves. He was watching me, tracking me. When I reached the end of the aisle, I didn't even look back. I ditched my cart right there and made a beeline for the nearest employee I could find, who was stocking cosmetics. "Excuse me," I said, trying to keep my voice from shaking. There's someone behind the freezer aisle, dressed all in black. I don't think they work here." The girl, her name tag said Leah, blinked at me, clearly startled. "What, like, behind the freezers?" "Yes," I said. My voice was low. "He's wearing a mask. He was following me." Leah hesitated, glanced toward the back of the store, then nodded quickly. "Okay, stay here. I'll check it out." She grabbed her walkie-talkie and disappeared through the double doors leading to the stockroom. I stood there, heart still racing, staring down the empty aisles. Minutes passed. Finally, Leah returned, looking confused. "There's no one back there," she said. "I checked the freezer section and the stockroom. It's empty." I knew what she was going to say next. Maybe I imagined it. Maybe it was a worker I just didn't recognize. But I knew what I saw. Still, I nodded, pretending to accept the answer. I grabbed a few essentials from the front of the store and checked out quickly. When I left the store that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that my eyes were still on me. It would have been easy to write it off as paranoia. Maybe I had imagined it after a stressful day, but the following week proved that wasn't the case. It was late again, same target, same routine. Except this standing half hidden behind the shrubs near the loading dock, dressed in black. The ski mask is still on. He popped out just enough that I could see his face, or what little of it the mask allowed, and he looked right at me. I drove past him, pretending not to notice, but my skin crawled the entire way home. And that wasn't the end of it. I swore it was over. After that last night, the storm, the figure in the hoodie, the endless hours of the police taking statements and checking grainy security footage, I told myself I was done with Target for good. No exceptions, no quick stops, no just 5 minutes runs. I deleted the store's app from my phone, tossed the half-used gift cards into the back of my junk drawer, and made a rule that I wouldn't shop anywhere alone after dark. For the next few months, I stuck to it. I ordered groceries online or went during the day with Rachel or my dad. I found a new coffee shop on the other side of town and stopped going to the old places I'd haunted before. It wasn't the same. Nothing felt as easy or as automatic, but it was safer. Or so I thought. Because when it comes to people like that, whether it was Kyle, the ski mask man, or whatever predator had followed me through the storm, routine isn't a shield, it's bait. It happened in early April. The snow had melted, the sun stayed up longer, and it felt like the world was waking up again. For the first time in months, I felt normal. I started sleeping better, laughing more. I convinced myself maybe it had all been a string of freak coincidences, that maybe small-town paranoia had gotten the better of me. Then, one afternoon, I got a message on Facebook, a name I didn't recognize. No profile photo, no mutual friends. "Hey, Jenna, been a while. Thought you might miss me." My stomach dropped. I hadn't gone by that fake name since Kyle. Nobody else would have known it. Nobody except the person who'd cornered me in the cold medicine aisle, grinning like a shark as he typed my number into his phone. But this wasn't Kyle's account, and the profile had only one post, a blurry photo of a parking lot taken at night. I didn't recognize the car in the picture. I recognized the place. It was the Target parking lot, taken from the garden center side, the very spot where I used to park. The caption beneath it read, "Still waiting. See you soon." I blocked the account instantly, but it was too late. The feeling was back, that clenching knot in my stomach, the prickling at the back of my neck. I called Rachel. I told her everything. "You need to go to the police," she said, her voice tight. I agreed. I filed another report, handed over screenshots. The officer, a different one this time, an older guy named Bryant, listened, nodded, but I could tell he was thinking the same thing the others had. No direct threat, no evidence of a crime. Unless someone showed up on my doorstep, there wasn't much they could do. I went home that night and triple-checked my locks. For days, nothing happened. Then one evening, I turned the corner behind my building and nearly screamed. Propped against the dumpster, half hidden in the fading light, was a single object. A red Target shopping bag. Inside was a phone charger, a bottle of allergy meds, and a cheap gray throw blanket. The exact one I'd bought the day I met Kyle. There was no note, no card, just those items, placed neatly in a bag like someone had gone shopping for me. I backed away, trembling so badly I almost dropped my keys. I made it back inside, locked every window, and pulled the blinds. I called the police again. Officer Bryant came out, took the bag, and promised to look for prints. I could see it in his face, though, the same expression the others had. Pity, skepticism. Another random incident in a small town full of weirdos. But I knew better. It was deliberate. That night was one of the longest of my life. Every sound outside made me flinch. A car passing, the rattle of branches against the window, the hum of the refrigerator. I kept the lights on in every room and sat on my couch, clutching a kitchen knife I wasn't entirely sure I could use if it came to it. The next night, my phone buzzed. No caller ID, just the voicemail. I played it. It was 30 seconds of breathing, slow, wet, like someone with a cold was standing inches from the receiver. Then a voice. "I see you, Jenna. You look tired. You shouldn't be alone." I dropped the phone. I didn't sleep at all that night. The following afternoon, Rachel came to stay with me. Neither of us said it out loud, but we both knew something was closing in. We tried to keep it light, ordering pizza, watching stupid comedies, but every creak of the floorboards made us both jump. I could see it in her eyes. She was scared too, not just for me, but for herself, for what being close to me might mean. I kept my curtains drawn, didn't answer unknown numbers, avoided the old parking lots, the old streets. I even called my mom, crying, confessing everything I'd kept from her since it started. She begged me to come home. I almost did, but it would have meant quitting school, leaving my job, giving up the tiny patch of independence I'd fought so hard for. So I stayed. And that was my mistake, because the final night, the last time it happened, was one I'd never seen coming. It started as another restless evening. Rachel had left to grab some things from her place and promised to be back within an hour. I tried to distract myself, reading, scrolling social media. I peeked through the peephole. No one was there. I waited 5 minutes, my hands trembling. No more texts, no knocks, just silence. I almost convinced myself it was a prank, some random wrong number. Then my phone rang. Blocked number. I didn't answer. I watched it ring, paralyzed. When it stopped, A new voicemail notification appeared. I pressed play. Breathing again, heavy, closer, like the phone was right against someone's mouth. Then a whisper, "I'm inside." I dropped the phone, scrambling for my keys and the kitchen knife. I bolted to the back door, my hands fumbling with the lock. As I swung it open, a figure darted past the window in my peripheral vision. I screamed, slammed the door shut, locking it again. I dialed 911, choking out my address. The dispatcher's calm voice barely registered over the blood pounding in my head. Within minutes, red and blue lights painted my street. Officers swept the house. No sign of anyone. The windows are still locked, doors secure, but on the back porch, pressed into the frost-covered glass, was a single handprint. I didn't stay there another night. I packed a bag and left town before dawn. To this day, I don't know who it was, how they got that close, or if they ever really left. But every time I see a red Target bag, my skin crawls. Some places and some people don't let go. I didn't sleep the night after it happened. Even in my tiny upstairs bedroom, the rain hammering against the window like desperate fingers, I lay frozen, staring at the ceiling as every sound felt magnified. A car passing by sounded like a scream. The wind groaning through the eaves felt like a voice whispering my name. Every shadow in the corners of the room seemed to move when I wasn't looking. And the worst part, the thing that truly gnawed at me, more than the figure, more than losing Paul, more than the cops acting like it was all some prank gone bad, was that I knew it wasn't over. Because when I got home that night, drenched, clothes clinging to me, face raw from the wind, I'd found something on my doorstep. A red Target badge. Not mine, not Devin's, and not Jenna's either. No name at all. Just the scratched plastic rectangle lying there on the welcome mat like it belonged. I'd stared at it for a long time, too long. Long enough for my mom to yell from the kitchen asking if I was okay. I didn't answer. I couldn't. I scooped it up and tossed it in the trash. But an hour later, when I went to toss my damp clothes into the hamper, it was sitting there on top of the pile. That time I buried it in the bottom of the outside trash can. Made sure the lid was tight, told myself it was over. But it wasn't. The next day, I texted Devin, or tried to. His phone went straight to voicemail. I called the store. No one answered, not even the daytime manager, Greg, the guy who practically lived there. Finally, around noon, I drove by. The store was closed. A handwritten sign taped to the door read, "Closed until further notice for maintenance issues." Except there were no work trucks in the lot, no crews, no signs of any activity. Just the same rain-slicked pavement, the storm clouds still low, thick, like the sky was holding its breath. I sat there in my car for a long time, engine running, staring at those glass doors. I half expected to see someone inside, a flash of pale skin, an empty face behind the glass. But nothing. I left. That evening, Devin finally called me back. His voice was thin, hoarse, like he hadn't slept either. "Listen," he said, "forget about it. Forget the store. Forget what happened. Don't talk to anyone. If anyone calls asking questions, don't answer. Just hang up." "Devin, what are you talking about? What did you see?" A pause, then quietly, "It followed me home." I felt a chill skate up my spine. He went on, his words broken, edged with raw fear. "I keep hearing knocks on the walls, in the attic, in the crawl space. I called the police twice. They don't find anything. but I know it's there. I wanted to say, not directly, just the edge of something behind me. A flicker of motion by the bedroom door. When I turned, nothing. But the air was wrong. Heavy. Charged. Like the moment before lightning hits. I left every light on, closed the bathroom door, slept, or tried to, with my phone clutched in my hand, though it barely picked up a signal. At 3:11 a.m., my phone buzzed. An unknown number. I didn't answer. A voicemail appeared. I made the mistake of listening. The message was a whisper, a single word. Soon. No voice I recognized, but not entirely human either. Thin, stretched, like a recording played too slowly. By morning, the badge was back on my windowsill, and it didn't stop. For days afterward, I caught glimpses, in reflective surfaces, behind parked cars, across the street at night. Always there, never close enough to fully see. Just the silhouette, the movement. Devin stopped responding altogether. A week later, his house was empty. Lights off. Mail piling up. No one knew where he'd gone. The police dismissed it. People leave town. People break leases. Happens all the time, they said. But not like this. Not both of us. Not after what happened. A month later, Paul's car was found in a lake 2 towns over. No sign of him. No body. The only thing inside was a red Target badge, balanced carefully on the passenger seat. His name scratched out. I transferred colleges by then, moving an hour away, hoping distance mattered. But sometimes, late at night, I'll be walking past a storefront or catching my reflection in a darkened window, and I'll see it. A flicker, a shape, and I know it's still there, waiting. The last time it happened, a week ago, I was coming home from a night class, my car parked by the curb, and sitting on the driver's seat was a new badge, a fresh one, name printed in crisp white letters, You. That's when I knew it wasn't just following anymore. It was choosing, and someday soon, it would stop watching and start talking. I never thought twice about people loitering in the store. Working night shifts, you see your share of weirdos, lonely insomniacs, bored teenagers, people who wander aisles just to feel less alone. But something about this guy, something about him was wrong. I couldn't name it yet, but deep down, some old survival instinct told me I wasn't just seeing a creepy dude. I was seeing something worse. I tried to shake it off by throwing myself back into work. Clothing returns, folding displays, double-checking that the dressing rooms were empty. But the sense of dread clung to me like a shadow. At 9:55 p.m., the closing announcement played over the speakers. Devin and the others gathered near the front, ready to lock up as soon as the last customers left. I scanned the floor, doing a quick mental head count. And that's when I realized something. Where was Hoodie Guy? Where were the other customers? And where was Paul? The store felt empty. Too empty. Devin noticed me looking uneasy. You okay? You look pale. I swallowed hard. Paul's still on the floor, right? Devin frowned. Should be. You want me to radio him? He picked up the walkie. Paul, report to the front. Silence. Dead air. He tried again. Still nothing. A creeping sense of panic gripped my chest. I yanked out my phone and opened the store's security app Paul used to monitor the floor. Every feed. Static. Even the front entrance. That doesn't make sense, Devin muttered, his brow furrowing. Those cameras never go down all at once. Then, the lights in the seasonal aisle flickered and went out. We both froze. Is that a breaker thing? I asked, my voice cracking. Devin shook his head. Not how they're wired. He grabbed the radio again. Paul, report to the front immediately. This isn't funny. Nothing. I took a few hesitant steps toward the dark seasonal aisle. The candy displays were swallowed in shadow. And then, from the darkness, footsteps. Fast, running, getting closer. I screamed. Devin stumbled back, dropping the radio. We both watched as Paul came sprinting out of the darkness, his face pale as a sheet, sweat pouring down his face. He looked like a man being chased by hell itself. We need to lock the store, now, Paul wheezed. Paul, what the hell is going on? Devin demanded. Paul gripped his flashlight like a lifeline, his knuckles white. He's not right. I saw him. He's not human. Before we could get a word out, the front doors opened. The man at the counter, he's a freak. I saw the gun. I felt my heart drop into my stomach. What do you mean? He's coming for us. I had no idea what she was talking about. I'd seen the man, but he hadn't seemed threatening. Then again, I hadn't really looked. Let's check the front door, I told her, trying to stay calm. Maybe we can open it. Get out. Call the cops. She nodded, her eyes glassy with fear, and followed me down the dark aisles. The storm outside screamed against the glass walls, thunder cracking above. The lights flickered again. The silence inside the store was heavier than any storm. When we reached the counter, I told her to stay put while I grabbed the key to the back exit. But as I reached for it, footsteps. I spun around. Nothing. Then a soft, wet grunt. I turned my flashlight just in time to see the man from earlier, his eyes wide, bloodshot, holding a wrench. His clothes were stained red. He's dead, the man muttered. The girl, she killed him. My heart slammed against my ribs. What? She came from the back, out of nowhere. She hit him with the wrench. I swear, it wasn't me. I looked behind me. The girl was gone. The space where she'd stood moments ago, empty. A cold chill ran down my spine. Where the hell had she gone, and why didn't I hear her leave? She's here, the man hissed. The store fell silent, except for a faint scrape of shoes against wet linoleum. Slow, deliberate. I grabbed the wrench from his shaking hands, backing away. The footsteps crept closer. A low, guttural chuckle echoed through the store. Don't worry, a voice whispered, unnervingly close to my ear. We're almost done here. I spun. Nothing. Panic clawed at my throat. I turned back to the front, gripping the wrench like a shield. And then, there she was, just a few feet away, face pale, hair limp and wet, her eyes hollow like two empty pits. A twisted smile pulled at her lips. You should have left, she said softly. The lights overhead flickered, casting monstrous shadows across the walls. I swung the wrench, but my hand passed straight through her like she was made of smoke. The storm outside rattled the windows, and then everything stopped. The power snapped back on. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead. I stood alone. The girl was gone. The man was still there, staring at me in terror, his hands raised. She's not human," he stammered. And behind me, her empty eyes stared out of the mirror, her grin widening. I stumbled back. The door slammed shut. Darkness swallowed everything. And that was the last time I ever worked night shift at that Target. The police never found the girl, or the man. The mirror, the door, gone, as if none of it had ever existed. But I know what I saw, and I'll never forget her smile. I used to work at Target a couple of years ago. I worked inside the store on the sales floor and mostly on the grocery side during this time. I was a part-time employee and I worked maybe 20 to 30 hours a week. One night, I was working a pretty standard shift for me. It was from 4 p.m. to 10 p.m. when it started. Things were kind of busy. I would move all around one side of the store and do whatever I needed to, mainly stock shelves or organize things. I also answered customer questions and told them where certain items were if they wanted to know. I've been working there for about 6 months at the time, and I knew the store like the back of my hand. So fast forward to about 9:30 p.m. or so that night. By then, the store had become very quiet. We were open until 11 p.m. back then, so we were not about to close. But it was still very quiet. Many of my coworkers had left, and the overnight team was beginning to arrive. On the grocery side, though, it was easy to stay busy. That side always had more shoppers, so it required more attention. All of the employees at Target carry a walkie-talkie for communication. I heard somebody say my name on the walkie, and I responded to them. I wasn't sure who it was, but they told me to go to the next channel, so I did. I was used to people calling me on there, and had received several calls earlier in the night. When you got a call on the walkie, usually it was anything from taking a break to being needed in another section of the store. As I was flipping to the next channel, I was wondering who it was that was calling me. After changing channels, I announced that I was there. At first, I heard nothing at all. Then, after a few seconds, I heard this creepy-sounding laugh. It went on, and I spoke again, asking who it was that was talking to me. They didn't answer, though, and just kept laughing. Once more, I asked who it was, but was starting to suspect that it was a joke. Then, they stopped laughing and said my name. It was a man speaking in a very deep voice, like he was trying to disguise it. He said that he was waiting for me in the parking lot. I laughed a little, assuming that it was somebody just messing around. After all, most of us were just about done for the night. I still couldn't figure out who it was, though. I kept working and pretty soon was done and could clock out. I went into the employee-only area, got my things, and then left the store. Now, the parking lot was very quiet. Most of the cars belonged to employees and were parked towards the middle. Then there was my car parked near the way back corner. It had been very busy when I arrived, so when I was walking out to my car and about halfway there, I noticed one other car parked near mine. It was a few rows over and to the left, at least 100 feet away. But the engine was running when I reached my... But it started going really fast. I didn't recognize the cars belonging to anybody that I knew. It quickly drove closer, and I got inside of my car and locked the door. Then the car parked in the space next to mine, but going in the opposite direction. I looked over, but the window was really tinted, and I couldn't really see in. It was at that moment that I remembered what the person had said to me on the walkie. Was that not a joke? I sort of had a bad feeling about this. Still, I figured that I would just drive home, and I hoped that whoever this was would not follow me. As soon as I started to pull away, though, the car started driving and turned around. I then realized that's exactly what was going on. I turned and started heading back towards Target. I didn't want to drive home being followed. I drove back towards the front middle of the parking lot and closer to the store. This was where most of the other cars were parked and scattered around. I parked in between two other cars that were parked already. The car that was following me drove closer, but then parked across and a little ways back. Now it was maybe 50 feet away from me. Then I got out of my car and walked extremely fast for the entrance of Target. I looked back briefly and saw that the car was still running, but nobody got out. That made me feel a little bit better. After I made it inside Target, I saw one of my coworkers who I knew walking by, and I told him about what happened. We both decided to look and see if the car was still there. After making it to the entrance doors, we looked out, and I pointed to the car. We watched it, and then something surprising happened. It pulled out of the parking space that it had backed into. Then it slowly drove up the aisle and out of sight. The car had finally left. I then left Target once more and headed for my vehicle. I walked quickly and made it inside. Then I started the engine and backed out, but after I backed out, I was going to drive down the normal way that I usually left. But it was then that I saw a car in the far distance coming from the corner of the parking lot opposite to me. It was headed in my direction, and I was pretty sure that it was the same car. I scrambled to turn my car to face the other direction. The car was still really far away from me, but it was getting closer. Then I quickly drove out of the lesser-used back exit of Target. This road led to another quieter road that went behind another store that was nearby. I think that it was a sporting goods store, and after I went on the road, I went into the parking lot from there. I drove all the way around the sporting goods store and parked on the side of it. I knew that the car following me would have no way of knowing that I was there. It probably assumed that I just tried to get back on the highway. I waited there, just hoping that I would not see headlights coming around the corner. Several minutes went by, and thankfully I didn't. Then, I was finally able to leave and go home. After that experience, nothing like that happened while working at Target. I'm a former Target employee and worked in the clothing department mainly. I worked there for 7 months total, and I liked working there. It was a good job, and most of the coworkers, as well as customers, were nice. But there was one coworker that I had some problems with. There was a guy named Ed, and he worked in the electronics department. Over time, I got to know him a little bit, not that well though. There's a lot of turnover at a store like Target, but also many employees that stick around. So the people in all departments that worked there for most of the time that I did, I either recognized or got to know. I only spoke to Ed briefly once or twice. For the first several months, I was much closer with many of the other coworkers. But one time, I was taking my break and was by myself in the break room. I think it was a little bit later at night, and that's why nobody else was in there. Well, just a couple of minutes after I got in there, Ed entered and then started talking to me. He was friendly for the most part and asked me some things about myself, and I was friendly back to him. But then, like 5 minutes into the conversation, he asked if I wanted to hang out with him and suggested that he could come over to my house. Now, I really didn't want to hang out with him, and I especially didn't want him coming over. I said I didn't think that I could, and then I changed the subject because it was kind of awkward. We talked for the rest of my break. Well, it was mostly Ed talking, and I was just listening. Finally, I was back to work. I didn't really see Ed for the rest of my shift that night, but over the next week or two, Ed started to talk to me more and more. He would go out of his way to see me, and he asked me again if he could come over to my house. He was starting to be a bit of a creep, to be honest with you. After that, though, I kind of stopped seeing him. I didn't really think about it until I heard that he had been fired. I didn't get any details on why he had been fired, or exactly when. I also didn't really give it that much thought, other than realizing that he wouldn't be talking to me anymore. So for the next week or so, work went on as usual. But one day I was not at work, but back home in my apartment. I got a text message from Ed. At first, I didn't know who it was, because I didn't recognize the number. I did not have Ed's number. But I was part of a large Target group chat with a bunch of us co-workers. Anybody in it could see my number, and I guess Ed was still a part of it. He texted me, saying that it was him, and told me that he was going to come over to my house. I was thinking, what's up with this guy, and going to my house? I texted him back, saying, please don't come to my house, Ed. It was nice to work with you at Target, but I don't think we should hang out. I expected him to understand, but apparently he didn't. Now he didn't respond to what I said, so I wasn't sure if he was mad or not, or if he even read it. But a few hours went by, and that night I was still at home. I lived by myself in my apartment, which was on the first floor of my building. It was probably like 9 o'clock at night when Ed texted me back. Finally, he said that he was at my house. When I read those words, I instantly started sweating, and my heart began racing. How did he know where I live? Was he really at my house? I started to text back, but didn't know what to say. I went over to my door and looked out the peephole into the hallway. Nobody was there. Maybe he was at my apartment, but not in the building yet. I looked out of my back window as well, and didn't see anything. I hoped that he wasn't actually there. But it was a really strange thing to say, if he wasn't. Finally, I texted back, telling Ed that I wasn't at home. I thought that maybe that would make him leave if he was here, or deter him from coming over if he wasn't. But he responded by saying, yes, you are home. I saw you. When I read that text, I started looking around like a paranoid person. My mind was racing. I was thinking crazy thoughts like, maybe he was already inside of my apartment, hiding under my bed or something. But he wasn't. I looked in all of my rooms. I then texted him back, asking him where he was. He responded by saying, at my house. I was confused by this, and I looked out of the people and windows again, without seeing him. I started to think that maybe he was just joking. At least, that's when I was trying to convince myself. I went back over to my peephole again, and looked out of it. I was looking out of it for like a minute straight, but still, nobody was there. I turned around, and then I saw him. He was standing on my patio, right outside of my sliding door, and looking in. I screamed like crazy, and then ran from my bedroom. I locked myself inside of it, and then called the police. A few moments later, I heard a knocking on my sliding door. I got another text from Ed, telling me to let him in. Why I screamed, I ignored it, and told the 911 dispatcher what the situation was. They told me that an officer would be there shortly. Ed then tried calling me, but I didn't answer, and ignored it. He texted me several more times, and I put my phone down because I didn't even want to look at it. It was then that I started to hear a loud banging coming from my sliding door. He really wanted me to let him in. This went on for the next several minutes. It honestly felt like forever. At last, the police arrived. I heard Ed talking with them loudly, and I left the bathroom. I soon saw him talking with officers, and they eventually got him to leave. Then I spoke with the officers, and I told my side of the story. Ed ended up getting trespassed from my apartment's property, and he was told not to come back. Luckily, I haven't seen him since. Then I haven't heard from him either. Obviously, I blocked his number and stuff. Hopefully, I never hear from him again. I used to have a routine, the kind of mundane, harmless pattern most people fall into without even thinking about it. A grocery run at night, a quiet store, no long lines, no bustling crowds. The Target near my apartment was open late, and I liked doing my shopping when things felt calmer. It was my way to wind down after long, tiring days. Nothing unusual had ever happened there, until that night. It was sometime last year, around early fall when the days were getting shorter and the evenings cooled off just enough to need a light jacket. I remember I had a small list: eggs, paper towels, some frozen dinners, and one of those cheap, fall-scented candles that I convinced myself made my apartment feel a little homier. I arrived at Target probably around 8:30 or 9 p.m. The parking lot was half empty, the glow of the store's big red sign cutting through the early evening gloom. I parked maybe 5 or 6 rows away from the entrance, under one of those flickering parking lot lamps that gave off a low buzz. I remember noting how quiet it was as I got out of my car and grabbed a cart. Only a couple of other people were coming or going, and most of the store staff were busy inside restocking shelves. The cool air felt nice on my skin, and for a moment everything was just ordinary. Inside, the store was exactly how I liked it, dimmer than in the daytime, with soft pop music playing over the speakers and aisles mostly empty. I grabbed my items quickly, moving through the familiar sections on autopilot. I wasn't in a hurry, I just didn't feel like lingering. There's something about those big box stores at night that can feel a little eerie when they're too empty, though I never let it bother me before. It took me maybe 20 minutes to gather everything on my list, and then I headed toward the self-checkout. The young woman working that section gave me a polite nod as I passed by. I paid for my things, bagged them, and stepped back out into the cool night air. That's when everything went sideways. I made my way to my car, pushing my cart and glancing briefly around the mostly empty lot. It felt safe, normal, but when I reached my car, a dark blue sedan, and circled around to load my bags into the back seat, something made me freeze. There was a face in the back window. It was just a flicker of a face, a man's face. I caught the reflection of pale skin, dark hair, and eyes locking onto mine, before he ducked down out of sight. In the split second that I processed what I'd just seen, my entire body went cold. My stomach dropped. I felt like my brain was scrambling to catch up to what my eyes had just registered. I didn't hesitate. I left my cart right there in the lot, groceries and all, and sprinted back toward the store entrance. I didn't even look back. My hands fumbled for my phone as I ran through the sliding doors, startling the employee at the front desk. I remember feeling my lungs burn as I told them, breathless and shaking, that there was someone in my car. They called the police while I dialed 911 myself. I gave them the address and tried to describe what I saw. My voice trembled so much I had to repeat myself twice. The dispatcher was calm, asking if I was somewhere safe and telling me to stay inside the store until officers arrived. It took maybe 5 minutes, but it felt like an eternity. Every time those sliding doors opened, my heart would leap, terrified that it might be him walking in. I paced near the front aisles, peering down each one, jumping at every figure in the corner of my vision. Then it got worse. I saw him. I was sure it was him. A man walked in from the parking lot, not hurried, not looking around, but moving toward the right side of the store. He was wearing a tan t-shirt, jeans, and a cap pulled low. I only saw him for a second before he turned down an aisle, but my blood ran ice cold. I couldn't swear it was the same man from my back seat, but my gut screamed that it was. I ducked behind a display and called the police again to tell them I thought he'd come inside. The Target employee locked the entrance doors temporarily, telling late-arriving customers to wait outside. We all just waited. When the officers arrived, 4 of them, in total, they spoke to me first, got my description, then went to check my car. He was gone. The doors were unlocked. I couldn't remember whether I'd locked them or not when I'd gone inside, but it didn't matter. The officers swept the car, checked the area, but found nothing. I told them about the man I thought I saw walk inside, and they combed the store, aisle by aisle. Still, nothing. I was embarrassed, scared, and exhausted by the time they returned. The officers were kind about it, saying these things happen and that it was better to overreact than ignore a gut feeling. One of them even stayed by my car while I retrieved my groceries, my abandoned cart still sitting there next to my vehicle, a half-melted bag of frozen dinners leaking condensation onto the asphalt. I was about to leave when it happened again. Driving home, I took the same route I always did, down a side road next to the shopping center before merging onto the main road. It wasn't well lit, and there wasn't a sidewalk, just patches of grass and dirt. That's when I saw him, a figure walking along the side of the road. Same build, same clothes. As I passed, he turned his head, and for a moment, our eyes met. I swear it was the same guy. He wasn't surprised to see me. He didn't flinch. He just stared. Then, without warning, he bolted toward my car. I swerved hard to the right to avoid him, heart hammering in my chest. I floored the gas, watching in my rearview mirror as he disappeared into the darkness. I called the police a third time, barely able to get the words out through my shaking breath. They sent an officer to the area, but again, no sign of him. That night, I didn't sleep. I double-checked every window and lock in my apartment, kept a kitchen knife by my bed, jumped at every sound. It took weeks before I could shop at night again, and even now, a year later, I still check my back seat before I get in my car. Every single time. I'll never forget the face in the window. I'll never feel completely safe in a quiet parking lot again.